Diesel is one of the least visible costs in everyday life. Most households do not buy diesel directly every week. They may not drive a diesel truck. They may not think about diesel when they walk through a grocery store, order a delivery, pay for a home repair, or watch construction materials move across town. Diesel is part of the physical economy. It moves freight. It powers delivery trucks. It runs farm equipment and construction machinery. It moves products by truck, rail, boat, and barge. It supports emergency generators in hospitals, industrial facilities, large buildings, institutions, and electric utilities. When diesel rises, the cost does not stay with truckers. It can move through freight, logistics, farming, construction, delivery, and the supply chains that bring goods into stores and homes. The effect is not immediate for every product, and it does not explain every price increase. Diesel remains one of the hidden inputs behind many goods and services that middle-class households pay for every month. A family may never see diesel listed on a grocery receipt. A homeowner may not see diesel written into a repair estimate. A shopper may not see diesel on the shelf price of household goods. If those goods were transported, stored, delivered, farmed, constructed, or moved through the physical economy, diesel may have been part of the cost before the product reached the customer. For the week ending May 11, 2026, the U.S. Energy Information Administration listed the national average retail price for on-highway diesel at $5.639 per gallon. 1 week earlier, on May 4, 2026, it was $5.64 per gallon. In some regions, the price was much higher. On May 11th, EIA listed West Coast diesel at $6.562 per gallon. California diesel was $7.32 per gallon. Those prices are operating costs for the transportation system. For households, the consequence is broader than the price at the pump. Diesel affects the cost of moving food, consumer goods, equipment, packages, building materials, and services. When diesel becomes more expensive, businesses that rely on transportation face higher costs. Some absorb the pressure. Some pass it through. Some face margin compression when fuel surcharge systems do not keep pace with price increases. That is how a fuel price becomes a household cost. The warning from the logistics sector was clear. On May 7, 2026, C.H. Robinson published its diesel fuel market update. The company said U.S. diesel inventories sit below seasonal norms but have not crossed crisis thresholds. That distinction matters. The research does not support saying diesel inventories are in crisis. It supports saying inventories were below seasonal norms, creating a less comfortable supply environment. C.H. Robinson also said, prices, however, have moved sharply higher, and carriers feel friction when fuel surcharge increases lag rapid diesel price increases. That sentence explains the connection between fuel prices and trucking costs. In freight, fuel is often treated as a pass-through cost. A fuel surcharge is intended to help compensate carriers when diesel becomes more expensive. C.H. Robinson warned that the pass-through does not always work smoothly in real time. The company said, while fuel is typically treated as a pass-through, timing gaps, imbalanced lanes, and higher deadhead miles compress carrier margins. Diesel prices moved sharply higher. Carriers faced higher operating pressure, especially when surcharge adjustments lagged the actual rise in fuel costs. Freight costs became less stable, and the cost pressure behind delivered goods moved closer to households. This does not mean every grocery item becomes more expensive immediately because of diesel. It means diesel becomes one more pressure inside the supply chain that helps determine how goods are priced, transported, and delivered. Diesel matters because it is embedded in physical movement. EIA says diesel engines are used in freight and delivery trucks, trains, buses, boats, farm vehicles, construction vehicles, military vehicles, and some cars and light trucks. EIA also says diesel generators provide backup and emergency power for industrial facilities, large buildings, hospitals, institutions, and electric utilities. EIA's explanation goes further. Diesel engines in trucks, trains, boats, and barges help transport nearly all products people consume. Diesel also powers most farm and construction equipment in the United States. That is the economic foundation of this issue. Diesel is not just a trucking fuel, it is a movement fuel. In 2022, U.S. transportation sector distillate fuel consumption, excluding biodiesel and renewable diesel, was about 2.98 million barrels per day, or about 125 million gallons per day. EIA says that accounted for about 75% of total U.S. distillate consumption and about 15% of total U.S. petroleum consumption. EIA also says diesel accounted for about 23% of U.S. transportation sector energy consumption in 2022 and about 6% of U.S. primary energy consumption. Those figures show why diesel price changes matter beyond truck stops. A fuel that supports freight, farming, construction, and delivery is part of the machinery behind the household economy. When diesel becomes more expensive, the cost pressure enters through several channels. A truckload carrier pays more to run each mile. A shipper faces higher freight costs or more difficult fuel surcharge negotiations. A distributor faces higher transportation expenses. A grocery chain moves products through a system where trucks, refrigerated trailers, warehouses, and delivery networks all depend on energy. A contractor using diesel equipment or receiving diesel-delivered materials faces higher input pressure. A household eventually encounters the combined effect in the cost of goods and services. The connection is often delayed, partial, or absorbed by businesses before it reaches the consumer. The pressure still exists inside the chain. The price movement in 2026 was sharp. C.H. Robinson reported that the national U.S. average diesel price was $3.57 per gallon in April 2025. By March 2026, it was $4.92 per gallon. By April 2026, it was $5.50 per gallon. C.H. Robinson also noted that fuel had historically never been this high except for May and June 2022. Diesel was not simply drifting upward. It moved from $3.57 in April 2025 to $4.92 in March 2026 to $5.50 in April 2026. Diesel prices rose sharply over the period covered by C.H. Robinson's update. Carriers and shippers faced a higher fuel cost base. The cost of moving goods through the economy became more expensive, increasing pressure on businesses that serve households. This is the hidden cost behind everyday purchases. A consumer sees the final shelf price. A shipper sees the freight invoice. A carrier sees the fuel receipt. The same cost pressure is moving through different points in the system. The trucking data shows why this matters. The American Transportation Research Institute's 2025 update reported that the average cost to operate a truck in 2024 was $2.26 per mile. Fuel costs were 48.1 cents per mile in 2024, compared with 55.3 cents per mile in 2023. The operating cost per hour was $90.89 in 2024, compared with $91.27 in 2023. Fuel is a major operating cost, but not the only one. Diesel does not explain every freight cost. Trucking costs also include labor, equipment, insurance, repairs, maintenance, regulation, capacity, and demand. A credible explanation has to keep the full cost structure in view. When diesel rises quickly, one major cost category becomes more difficult to manage. C.H. Robinson's May 2026 truckload update reported that carrier attrition continued, driven by elevated operating costs, including fuel. The company also raised its dry van cost per mile forecast from plus 17% to plus 23% year over year. It raised its refrigerated truckload cost per mile forecast from plus 16% to plus 23% year over year. The refrigerated freight detail matters for households because refrigerated truckload is closely connected to food and perishables. Truckload cost per mile forecasts were raised. Freight markets were facing higher expected operating costs. Goods that depend on trucking, including refrigerated goods, can face more cost pressure before they reach stores and households. This does not prove every grocery bill rises immediately because of diesel. It explains why diesel belongs in the cost chain behind food and delivered goods. Diesel also influences logistics decisions. C.H. Robinson said intermodal freight was gaining momentum in May 2026 as high diesel prices, new regulations, and truckload capacity constraints pushed shippers toward rail. That shows how fuel costs can change behavior across the supply chain. When diesel becomes expensive, shippers may look for different modes of transportation. They may shift freight from truckload to rail where possible. That can reduce some cost pressure, but it also shows the system adapting to higher fuel expense. For households, that adaptation is part of the hidden economy behind prices. Goods still have to move. If the most flexible mode becomes more expensive, businesses search for alternatives. Those decisions affect timing, routing, cost, and reliability. C.H. Robinson summarized the risk in another line from its May 2026 freight update. Diesel availability, not just price, drives risk. That sentence shifts the focus from the pump price alone to the stability of the supply chain. A business needs not only affordable diesel, but dependable diesel. A carrier needs fuel available on the route. A shipper needs goods to move on schedule. A store needs inventory to arrive. Households depend on that system functioning without visible interruption. When diesel availability or price becomes less stable, the risk does not remain inside the freight market. It can move toward delivery schedules, shipping costs, and the final cost of goods. The diesel story also has a second side. High diesel prices and biofuel policy can improve economics for some fuel producers. Reuters reported on May 15, 2026, that U.S. oil refiners were seeing improved biofuel profits because of recent EPA biofuel mandates and high fuel prices. Reuters said EPA mandates included a 60% increase in the use of biodiesel and renewable diesel, along with the long-standing requirement to blend about 15 billion gallons of ethanol into gasoline each year. In late March 2026, Reuters said EPA mandated record volumes of biofuels to be blended into gasoline and diesel for this year and next, including a 60% increase in biodiesel and renewable diesel use. EPA mandated record biofuel blending volumes. Demand for biodiesel and renewable diesel received stronger regulatory support, improving economics for some refiners and renewable fuel producers. The fuel supply chain became more complex, with benefits for some producers and continued uncertainty for carriers, shippers, and consumers facing volatile diesel prices. Reuters reported that RIN credit prices had risen more than 80% this year, to more than $2 each. Reuters also reported that Valero, described as the nation's biggest biofuel producer, saw its renewable diesel business swing to a $139 million profit in the first quarter from a $141 million loss 1 year earlier. HF Sinclair posted a $133 million profit in renewable diesel after a $17 million loss 1 year earlier. Phillips 66 narrowed losses in its renewable fuels division, and Reuters reported that its renewable diesel plants were running above capacity. The company side of the story is clear. Some refiners and renewable diesel producers benefited from high fuel prices and biofuel mandates. The economic impact is the central point. For some fuel producers, high diesel prices and stronger renewable fuel mandates created improved margins. For carriers and shippers, diesel prices created cost pressure. For households, the concern is whether higher transportation and logistics costs move into the prices paid for goods and services. That is the split in the economy. One sector's improved margin can exist alongside another sector's higher operating burden. Reuters quoted Rand Taylor, CEO of Fuel Oxy, N.C., saying, "The new record mandates bring multi-year certainty and stronger RINs." That quote explains why some businesses see opportunity in the policy change. Stronger mandates can support renewable fuel demand and credit values. Reuters also quoted Franklin Myers, CEO of HF Sinclair, telling investors, "We've waded through the hard times. Let's go harvest these good times." That quote shows how some producers viewed the improved market environment. For households, the relevant point is not whether those companies are right or wrong to benefit. The point is that the diesel market has winners and losers. Higher diesel prices can benefit some producers while increasing cost pressure for freight carriers and the businesses that depend on them. Reuters also included a caution. Jeff Moody, Senior Vice President of Government Relations and Policy at the American Fuel and Petrochemical Manufacturers, said, "Whether this proves to be a sustained shift or a temporary spike will depend on how these variables evolve over time." The research does not support a simple, permanent conclusion. It shows a current market environment with high diesel prices, improved biofuel margins for some producers, and uncertainty around how long the shift lasts. Reuters also reported that high soybean oil costs, limited soy crushing capacity, and fluctuating diesel prices could limit biodiesel and renewable diesel production. A policy can support renewable diesel demand, but feedstock costs and supply constraints still matter. A refiner may benefit from high diesel prices, while production economics remain uncertain. For regular people, the important point is that diesel prices sit inside a larger system. Policy, feedstocks refining, credits, crude markets, logistics, and transportation interact before costs reach the public. The timeline shows how the pressure developed. In 2022, EIA reported that transportation sector distillate fuel consumption was about 2.98 million barrels per day, or about 125 million gallons per day. Diesel was already deeply embedded in the transportation system. In 2024, ATRI reported that the average cost to operate a truck was $2.26 per mile, with fuel costs at 48.1 cents per mile. In April 2025, C.H. Robinson said the national average diesel price was $3.57 per gallon. By March 2026, that average had risen to $4.92. In late March 2026, Reuters reported that EPA mandated record biofuel blending volumes, including a 60% increase in biodiesel and renewable diesel use. By April 2026, C.H. Robinson said the national U.S. average diesel price was $5.50 per gallon. On May 7, 2026, C.H. Robinson said U.S. diesel inventories were below seasonal norms. Prices had moved sharply higher, and carriers were feeling friction when fuel surcharge increases lagged rapid diesel price increases. On May 11, EIA listed the U.S. average on-highway diesel price at $5.63.9 per gallon. West Coast diesel was $6.56.2. California diesel was $7.32.1. On May 15, Reuters reported that U.S. refiners were benefiting from biofuel mandates and high fuel prices, while also noting uncertainty around feedstock costs, limited supply, and diesel price volatility. This is not one isolated fuel price. It is an accumulation of high retail diesel prices, below normal inventories, freight surcharge friction, higher truckload cost forecasts, biofuel mandate changes, improved renewable diesel margins for some refiners, and uncertainty about supply and feedstocks. That accumulation turns diesel into a cost pressure issue. Diesel sits between energy markets and household life. It is purchased by carriers, farms, construction firms, logistics providers, delivery networks, bus systems, and emergency power users. Those users serve the rest of the economy. When their costs rise, the pressure can spread. For food, the connection runs through farm equipment, refrigerated trucking, warehouse movement, and store distribution. For household goods, the connection runs through ports, rail, trucks, warehouses, and last-mile delivery. For construction, the connection runs through equipment, materials, job site logistics, and delivered supplies. For public services, the connection can run through buses, emergency generators, and utility backup systems. Not every link creates an immediate price increase. Businesses may absorb costs, negotiate contracts, use surcharges, change shipping modes, or delay pass-through. Those actions do not erase the pressure. They determine where it lands and when. That is the hidden nature of diesel. It is often not seen by the consumer, but it is present in the cost chain. A gallon of diesel bought by a carrier can influence the cost of moving a pallet. A higher cost of moving a pallet can influence the cost structure of a retailer. A higher cost structure can affect pricing decisions, margins, delivery fees, or service costs. The final household does not need to buy diesel to be affected by diesel. The contrasting viewpoints are important. One view is that high diesel prices create broad pressure because diesel powers freight, farming, construction, and delivery. EIA's diesel use data supports that connection. A second view is that fuel surcharges are designed to pass fuel costs through the trucking system. C.H. Robinson acknowledges fuel is typically treated as a pass-through. It also says timing gaps, imbalanced lanes, and higher deadhead miles compress carrier margins. Fuel surcharges may reduce the impact, but they do not always remove it completely or immediately. A third view is that some companies benefit. Reuters reported improved renewable diesel profits for Valero and HF Sinclair, and higher RIN credit prices. High diesel prices and stronger biofuel mandates can support producer economics. A fourth caution is that diesel is not the only driver of logistics costs. ATRI's operating cost data shows fuel is significant, but trucking also depends on labor, equipment, insurance, repair, maintenance, regulation, capacity, and demand. That balance matters. The strongest conclusion is not that diesel alone makes everything expensive. It is that diesel is one of the hidden cost inputs behind much of the economy. When it rises sharply, it can increase pressure across many goods and services. The regional price data shows how uneven the burden can be. The national average was $5.63.9 on May 11th. The Gulf Coast was lower, at $5.15.2. The West Coast was higher, at $6.56.2. California was $7.32.1. A carrier operating in a higher price region faces a different fuel environment from one operating in a lower price region. A business that ships into or out of those regions may face different cost pressures. Households in those regions may encounter fuel-related pressure in different ways. The research does not support claims about specific local grocery prices or specific household impacts by state. It supports the broader point that diesel cost pressure is not evenly distributed. When the cost of the movement fuel rises, the physical economy becomes more expensive to operate. That is the central issue. Products do not move themselves. Food must be grown, harvested, refrigerated, shipped, stored, and delivered. Construction materials must be manufactured, hauled, lifted, and placed. Retail goods must move through ports, rail lines, warehouses, and trucks. Emergency systems must have backup power. Public and school buses require fuel. Farms and job sites need equipment. EIA's description of diesel use supports that reach. The household impact comes through exposure to the system's diesel powers. A family may not see the fuel line in the price, but it sees the final bill. It sees groceries. It sees delivery fees. It sees service calls. It sees building costs. It sees the general cost of keeping daily life supplied. Diesel is a hidden cost behind many things people buy. It is not the only cost. It is not always the largest cost. It is one recurring cost in the physical movement of the economy. As of May 16, 2026, the current reality was clear. EIA's latest diesel price data in this research showed the U.S. average on-highway diesel price at $5.63.9 per gallon for the week ending May 11th. Regional prices remained elevated, especially on the West Coast and in California. C.H. Robinson's May 2026 update said U.S. diesel inventories were below seasonal norms but not at crisis thresholds. Prices had moved sharply higher. Fuel surcharge lag was creating friction for carriers. Diesel availability, not just price, was a risk. C.H. Robinson's truckload update said carrier attrition continued, driven by elevated operating costs, including fuel. It raised both dry van and refrigerated truckload costs per mile forecasts to plus 23% year over year. Reuters reported that refiners were benefiting from biofuel mandates and high fuel prices. But output and profitability remained uncertain because of feedstock costs, limited supply, and diesel price volatility. Those facts describe a market where diesel pressure remains unresolved. Fuel is expensive. Inventories are below seasonal norms. Freight costs are under pressure. Some producers benefit. Some carriers absorb timing gaps. Some shippers look for alternatives. Households remain exposed because nearly everything they buy must move through a system powered in part by diesel. The final consequence is not a single price tag. Diesel price increases raise freight and carrier operating costs. Higher operating costs create fuel surcharge friction and margin pressure. Margin pressure and surcharge adjustments increase shipping cost pressure. Shipping cost pressure can move into goods, services, groceries, construction, and household budgets. Diesel may not appear on the receipt, but it can still be inside the price.